Elden Ring Nightreign is a weird one. It takes the foundation of one of the best open-world RPGs of a generation and turns it into not just a roguelite where death is even more of a big deal, but a three-person co-op focused roguelite. And in many ways, that strange experimental concoction is a success. Under the right conditions, Nightraign's 45-ish minute runs are positively thrilling. They are packed with surprising encounters, challenging decisions, satisfying opportunities for teamwork, and some of the best boss battles From Software has ever come up with. And that's a very high bar. The big problem, however, is that those right conditions are far more difficult to create than they should be. You really need to have a consistent squad of similarly skilled players that are able to devote hours at a time in order to see what makes Nightreign special. And when you don't, the flaws of its design are magnified tenfold. There is excellence in this Elden Ring spin-off, but it's excellence that's just a little bit tarnished. Let's get the most important caveat out of the way. If you are hoping to tackle Nightreign entirely solo, and are anything less than a hardcore Elden Ring player that actively seeks out ways to make that already difficult game even more challenging, Nightreign isn't for you. Yes, there is technically a single player option, but it's so poorly balanced that I would be honestly shocked if it isn't patched and adjusted within the first month of release. And this is coming from someone who lives and breathes these types of games. To understand why, we first need to go over what Nightreign even is. On a very basic level, this is a roguelite that takes place on an island called Limveld, which is kind of like a melting pot of Elden Ring's environments, enemies, bosses, and structures. The general flow of a run is split up into a 3-day cycle. On days 1 and 2, it's all about farming gear, defeating bosses, and leveling up so that you're as prepared as possible when you face off against one of the 8 extremely difficult Nightlord bosses on day 3. It's a great formula, and while you might think that the mostly static map would get old after a while, there's a good amount of procedural generation on every run that mixes up the location of just about every point of interest, requiring you to plan out a unique route on each new attempt. On top of that, there are also random events like boss raids, summoning portals, and other wild occurrences that inject a heavy level of chaos every once in a while. Efficiency is key because you are on a very strict time limit, with a battle royale-esque circle that constricts at set points throughout the day, eventually shrinking to the size of a small battlefield and setting the stage for a boss battle that ends the night. It is immediately obvious that Nightreign was designed with a 3-player squad in mind. Enemy encampments that don't require you to fight a single boss will instead have you spread out to take down 3 tough enemies. Basic encounters against 5 or more enemies that would be trivial with 3 players become costly time wasters when you're on your own. And the new Nightlord bosses all seem explicitly designed with having allies in mind, and I'm not sure how I would even approach several of them by myself. Nightreign at least scales up your damage when you're alone, but it doesn't change any of these fundamental design decisions in any way that would make solo play more reasonable. But the biggest issue is that co-op partners are able to revive each other when someone goes down, but you've only got 1 life to live against bosses when you're out on your own. That's generally the case in roguelites, but usually there's some sort of safety net that you can fall back on. For example, Hades has Death Defiances, and part of the progression of that game allows you to work towards unlocking more of them with every run. Returnal has artifacts that you can find that give you extra lives, rewarding you for being more thorough in your exploration. Spelunky has shortcuts that allow you to skip the early stages to get practice on the enemies, traps, and bosses that you only have limited experience with. The list goes on, but Nightreign has virtually nothing to make up for the fact that solo players lose access to that crucial revival option. There is an item that will resurrect you once with half of your life, but it's limited to the highest rarity tier, meaning you have to choose it over a legendary weapon if one does appear as a reward. Similarly, you may find them in a shop, but they cost a substantial amount of runes that you could instead use to level up. Either way, it's just not a solution that makes up for the crippling detriment of not having someone to revive you if you go down. None of this is to say that solo play is outright impossible, and I have had a few successful runs on my own, just that the balancing of solo play feels like a job half finished, and as a result, the frustration of playing alone wasn't worth the triumph for me to have any desire to play it more without a squad. Nightreign's saving grace is that when you do have a squad of 3 people who all know what they're doing, communicate well, and are generally pretty skilled at Elden Ring, it really is a lot of fun. The central idea of taking an entire game's worth of progression and condensing it into a 40-minute run is a strong one. Going from cutting down rats with a basic weapon to culling Elden Ring's most fearsome bosses with a badass armament that you may or may not have gotten to use in the main game is one of the coolest and most satisfying parts. It's 80 plus hours of character growth condensed into less than an hour and shot straight into your veins. Dropping into a run the first couple of times is certainly overwhelming, mostly because of the amount of information on the minimap you have to process, but at least FromSoft keeps the inventory and stat management very simple. Level ups are automatic, letting you press a button at a site of grace to automatically level your class's preferred stats. And as far as weapon stats go, all you have to worry about here is the damage number, the elemental affinity, the passive bonus you get simply for having the weapon in your inventory, and the weapon skill that comes along with it. This meant when I had a choice between 3 rewards, I was able to very quickly make a judgment on what I needed at that moment and continue on my way. Eventually I started to understand what rewards were offered at which camps, which ones were quick and could be cleared before the circle closed in, which ones I should do only if I had a lot of extra time, what level I should attempt certain roaming bosses, and which bosses I should absolutely avoid unless my team was really confident in our builds. Exploring these areas can be more frustrating than it needs to be, thanks to a new wall climbing ability that just feels straight up bad. Especially when it takes 3 attempts to jump over what looks like should be an easily scalable wall as you're trying to escape from the encroaching circle. But learning the ins and outs of the map helped my efficiency and led to a very satisfying feeling of skill progression that wasn't tied to the actual progression system that offers persistent improvements between attempts. That system is tied to relics that can be won after completing a run. Whether you win or lose, you still get relics, but the better you perform, the better the quality and quantity of relics you earn. These can be equipped before a run and impart stat bonuses, starting skills or elemental affinities for your initial weapon, buffs for performing certain actions, and in some cases, they can even improve the skills of a specific class. When you're just starting out, these bonuses are hardly noticeable and too random to really make any sort of compelling build from, but eventually, with enough runs under your belt, you'll get some powerful relics that can really start to have an effect on your power level in a run. That said, there should really be more of an element of choice with regards to the meta progression, or at least a way to control some of the randomness. There are a small selection of relics that you can buy at the jar shop inside your base before runs, and there are set relic rewards for being Night Lord bosses and completing class-specific objectives called remembrances, but other than that, you're completely at the mercy of the RNG gods when it comes to what relics you get. It can be really annoying when you're looking to strengthen your preferred class, and you keep getting relics that just don't do anything for you. One of the biggest departures compared to what we're used to from Elden Ring is that the classes are now actual classes, with unique skills and gameplay styles as opposed to soft classes that just determine your starting stats and weapons. And the 8 options are varied and well defined, with even the most basic archetypes having some interesting twists to them. The Wilder, for instance, is the general jack of all trades, but also has access to a nifty grappling hook that can be used to pull weak enemies towards you, zip yourself towards larger enemies, or simply zoom you around the field at high speeds if you aim it on the ground. In addition to the basic fighter, mage, and ranger archetypes, you also have a few completely unique choices that don't fit into any pre-existing mold. One of the most interesting classes is the Executor, whose main skill has you pulling out a unique sword with a Sekiro-like parrying mechanic tied to it. Basically, by blocking attacks with proper timing, you completely negate damage, don't lose any stamina, and reduce the enemy's own stamina, potentially opening them up for a critical hit. It's a very risky class, especially in a game where missing a parry can mean almost certain death, and it feels like the offensive power of the Sekiro sword is a little too weak to justify the risk of the parries, but I appreciate this inclusion nonetheless as both a nod to Sekiro and a completely different way to approach combat. As mentioned, each of the classes has a remembrance tied to them, which is essentially a collection of journal entries that chronicle the story of how they wound up in Limveld and their purpose for being there. It's a far cry from the rich lore that we're used to in FromSoft games, but at least each of the remembrances has a handful of playable chapters that have you completing specific objectives in order to earn powerful relics, as well as a healthy amount of runes to help you level up during the actual run itself. Almost all of Nightreign is made up of existing Elden Ring parts, but there are a few surprise bosses that are pulled from the Dark Souls series as well. But the 8 Night Lords are brand new, and oh boy, they're almost all unlike any boss FromSoft has ever designed before. Many of them are clearly inspired by MMO boss battles, with a number of party-wiping attacks that must be stopped or interrupted before they get a chance to finish their preparation. Others are designed to split the party up into roles to either hold aggro or press the assault, and some are just designed to be all-out wars against absurdly aggressive foes. They're almost all bangers, with only one of them being a dud, due to the best strategy simply being hanging back and pelting them with arrows for what felt like an hour. Still, 7 out of 8 is still pretty great, especially when those 7 are among the best From Software has ever created, with excellent accompanying soundtracks to match. I don't want to spoil them too much, but the fight against the Fisher and the Fog boss in particular is so good it gave me goosebumps all throughout. But the creativity of those bosses once again shines a light on the eldritch elephant in the room. They only really work as a team, and by far the 2 biggest issues facing Nightreign right now are 1. The shocking lack of crossplay, and 2. The absence of a duos playlist. If you play as a duo, you will be forced to fill the 3rd player with matchmaking. It is simply a lot to ask of a group of 3 people who all must have purchased the $40 game, play on the same platform, be of a similarly matched skill to be able to handle the extreme challenge of the day 3 bosses, have the time to devote 45 minutes per run, and also can agree on fighting the same boss that they may or may not need to beat for their own individual progression. There is a decent pinging system that at least makes it possible for light communication with a group of randos, but there's no built-in voice chat, which makes nuance like trying to communicate that your group should hit the basement of the castle instead of the front or side entrance virtually impossible. It's just a night and day difference when you're able to group up with a squad that communicates well and knows what they're doing versus when you've got one that doesn't listen to you or just constantly makes bad decisions, especially with no way to vote to cancel or quit out of a run without penalty. That makes the prospect of random matchmaking on the live servers pretty unappealing. When Elden Ring Nightreign is played exactly as it was designed to be played, it's one of the finest examples of a 3-player co-op game around. The 8 character classes are each fun to use and feature a surprising amount of depth despite their limited movesets. The new Night Lord boss battles are among the best FromSoft has ever crafted and make the most of the 3-player dynamic, and the fast-paced race against the clock nature of each run leads to exciting moments of split-second decision-making and frantic rushes to try to finish up a fight before the circle closes in. But a lack of crossplay, duo matchmaking, and built-in communication tools makes it hard to create the conditions needed to have this kind of experience unless you're bringing 2 real-life friends on every run. And if you want to just play by yourself, I can't recommend it because of the poor solo mode balancing. All of this amounts to an ambitious spin-off that's exhilarating when you're able to create the proper conditions, and one that quickly flips to incredibly frustrating when you're not.
Executive Reviews editor Tom Marks here with Mitchell Saltzman to talk about his review of Elden Ring Nightreign. Mitchell, you reviewed both Elden Ring and the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC and gave both of them 10s, so big fan of both of those. I want to talk first about Elden Ring and what you loved about it, because you don't go into that a ton in the review, but it is what sort of is the basis of what makes this game still good. So what from Elden Ring did you love that you do still see in Nightreign that is carried on here?
It's a little bit of a tough comparison because Nightreign is, they're the same foundation, but they're very different genres, right? One of the things I really, really loved about Elden Ring was it came at a time where I was just kind of like burnt out from open world games, and the style of open world games where you just get a checklist of things to do. You gotta, it just gets a little overwhelming going from like side quest to side quest to side quest to side quest. And Elden Ring kind of, broke free from that. It was just kind of this free roam, go wherever you want. There will be stuff to do there. And then once you finish up what you do over there, go in another direction. You'll find something cool over there too. With Nightreign, obviously it's a roguelite, so the exploration aspect isn't there. But, everything else that I love about Elden Ring, the enemy design, the world design, the quality of the weapons, like I say in the review, it's having 80 hours worth of progression kind of condensed into a 45-minute run.
we've talked about this a little bit, and you do talk about it in your review, but I'm wondering if there's something else that's like probably Elden Ring diehards are going to be a little disappointed by.
I mean, I talk about it a lot in the review. I think it's the single player aspect.
Sure.
I think, you know, there's going to be a lot of people who are interested in this game being Elden Ring fans, but, you know, they're not the kind of hardcore, crazy Elden Ring fans that have to, you know, do soul level 1 runs or, you know, really have to beat all the bosses. You know, they just kind of like getting through the game, getting to the end, or maybe even not. Maybe they just like kind of the vibe of it. And I think Nightraign's going to be too rough for them. Yeah, so here's like the big thing that I think will get people to understand. Like, if you come against a really tough boss in a Souls-like game, you know, if it's one of the toughest bosses in the game, FromSoft is not cruel. You know, they'll put a Site of Grace right outside of it. They won't make it a very long run back to the boss. So you kind of get that rhythm of like immediately trying again to learn the boss. In Nightreign, those bosses are about the same difficulty, but in order to get another shot at it, you have to do another 45-minute run of the roguelite aspect just to even see the set of moves that it's using on you. So that's like the biggest problem with it, is that you never get that chance to learn from failure, which is kind of like the core principle of a Souls-like.
If you were to speculate, do you think that the problems you're talking about with solo play and that you know, the issues that come with it, do you think that those are patchable? Do you think that the updates, tweaks, balance changes could make this a better experience for a solo player over time? Or do you think that because this game was designed with 3 people in mind, they're just too baked into the design of Nightreign to really make much progress in the long term?
I really do think that they could fix a lot of the issues that I have with this game. And they've already talked about duo mode is something that I've interviewed them and I talked to them about it. They said it was an oversight that they didn't include it, but that they're looking to add it in a future update. So I'm confident that we'll at least get duo play. Crossplay, again, we're not developers. I don't know why I would have to imagine they wanted crossplay, but crossplay I think is a must for this kind of game.
And even if it does get crossplay though, do you think that updates could bring hope to somebody who doesn't want to play multiplayer, or is this really is it really just kind of always going to be something that's not really intended?
No, I think there's absolutely a way to patch it to make it more friendly for solo players. Like I said, the damage scaling, that's like step 1, I feel like. Step 2 to me would be to make you know, that item that makes you respawn when you die, make that a little more easily obtained, make it like a purple rarity item rather than a golden, the highest level rarity item. But yeah, I think just ways to make it less punishing and give people more of a shot when they get to a boss for the first time, because it like I said, it's really rough when you have to learn the moves of a boss and you get one shot and then you have to wait 45 minutes before you get another shot if you get through, you know, those 2 days.
Well, Mitchell, thank you so much for digging a little bit more into your Nightreign review, your thoughts on Elden Ring, the base game, and all that jazz. We'll be back, I'm sure, before long to talk to Mitchell again. If you want to hear another conversation I've had with him, go check out his review of Doom: The Dark Ages. And then if you want another action-y, Souls-ish inspired, not directly Souls-y game, we have a review of Blades of Fire from Jada that you can also go check out with a conversation at the end of that one. And for everything else, stick with IGN.